ARC tutorials. This is testing concept series, and in today's episode we are going to learn all about unit testing. I bet if you are a developer or a QA, you are already aware of the concept of unit testing. But I'll cover a little bit more. I hope you will learn a lot new things in this episode because I'm going to cover about some of the tools, some of the frameworks that are available, some of the things that you might not be aware as part of unit testing concept. I'm sure it will help you. Let's get started. This is part 14 of the testing concept series. If you have missed out on the previous episodes or previous concepts that I've covered, this is the playlist that I've shared. Please do check them out so that you have continuity in your learning. Today we are learning about unit testing. So unit testing is a type of testing where individuals will test their piece of code or a unit or a component or a feature that they're working on. We are only here to validate that small piece of code or small unit that's working as expected or not. Typically, we do that by writing test cases for each of the spec or you can say each unit that particular functionality we are testing. The idea is to make sure that all the tests will pass in isolation from rest of the application, right? The reason being that developers will can quickly identify any issues with respect to that particular piece of code or functionality. Overall, a lot of unit tests will help you to make sure that each module, feature, component, unit that you're talking about is working as expected. Alright, so why is unit testing important? For first reason being that when you work on any enterprise application in a large setup, usually the SLAs, the service level agreements, will mention that you have to cover at least 95% of code coverage in unit testing. Which means whenever we write any code, we have to write the corresponding unit tests. And more so if you're working on any modern front end or back end frameworks like say Angular, React, Vue on front end, on back end if you say Node, Express or Java. So you have to, it's a must to write unit test because it helps us ensure the quality of the software, and anything that we know that whatever logic we have written is successfully implemented and is passing every single time. Unit testing allows developers to make the changes of code with confidence. Now, when you have a lot of unit tests, when you change something, you know that it's failing, the unit test is failing, you need to fix it as well. So that helps us update the code, refactor the code as well. Unit testing helps us provide it's kind of a documentation of the intended behavior, right? In a sense, when you write unit test, it's nothing but it's kind of a documentation that anybody can refer to that and understand what that particular piece of code is doing. And hence, unit testing is essential part of it. So my request is whatever language you are preferred to work on, please make sure that you learn the corresponding unit test framework for it. Now, these are some of the frameworks and tools that are available. JUnit, right? For that's for writing unit tests in Java. NUnit for .NET. XUnit for multiple programming languages. You have Mocha, you have Jasmine, PHP Unit, PyUnit, and RSpec. These are some of the leading frameworks that you should consider learning, especially aligned with the framework that you are intending to learn. For the front end, I'll always recommend Mocha. There is Zest and there is Jasmine. So those are the unit testing tools that you should learn if you're going towards the front end frameworks. Advantages, we discussed about this. It helps in improving the software quality. It The code becomes much faster and efficient in development. The reason that whenever we make any code changes, we know that what is the logic we are implementing, and hence accordingly the tests will be written. A clean code is always easy to maintain and update, right? That's a basic software design principle that code should be smallest level in methods or principle, and then when you do that, it's much easy to change, it's much easy to update, it's much easy to refactor. Unit testing also helps in kind of a better collaboration between different developers. Let's say today you worked on that feature and you released it as part of this sprint. In the next sprint, someone else has to work on it. But when you have clear cut unit tests, it's much easy for someone else to follow the code and see what is happening. So it promotes better collaboration and better documentation. Now, what are some of the disadvantages? Now, this is something that a lot of you may not agree upon, but that's fact, and I have seen it at very large enterprises also. First and foremost, if you are in an early stage of development, when you put in a lot of effort and time in writing and maintaining unit tests, the requirements keep changing very often in an agile model. So the disadvantage can be that you need to end up updating a lot of unit tests, which is not recommended, especially at the early phases of the software development. The tests are fragile, right? That means whenever requirements change, you need to go back, not only implement the functionality, but also write new tests and also update the old tests that were written. So that way it becomes little fragile. Limited coverage, right? Now this is one of the biggest drawback that I call it, especially with the latest frameworks, that unit tests provide only test coverage for that component, right? You don't know what other pieces are broken, you don't know what's the gap, you don't know what are the potential issues others your code refactoring may introduce, etc. So unit testing is limited coverage. However, as you mature and certain functionality is stable, that's when you should bring in the unit testing and end-to-end testing and all those. False positives. A unit test may produce a false positive report, which means that a unit is working correctly when it is actually not, because your data input to that particular method is always fixed in tests. So your test may pass, but in actual component or in actual module or a feature, it may fail, right? You would have, I'm sure you would have seen that lot of things. So if you have, please let me know in the comment section what are the different types of false positives that you have come across. I have seen a lot of things like that, that it actually works with the test data, but with the actual, when you pass negative data or some other data, it may it may fail the feature or the functionality. So do share your learnings about it. So this is unit testing. I'm not touch basing much about it because I know a lot of you are already aware of unit testing. If not, I've covered the basics and the concepts, the tools that are covered, and the advantages and some disadvantages. I'll keep it short in this particular episode because I'm sure, like I said, a lot of you are developers who are aware with unit testing, but I still want to highlight the fact that you have to get your hands dirty with any unit testing framework, because if you want to really grow in your career into next level, you must be making sure that you are really good at unit testing so that you can become a lead and help other team members. That would be my recommendation to you. Thank you so much for joining in this episode. We will continue the learning in this series. In the next episode, I'll cover system testing. If you like my work and tutorials, please consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/arctutorials. Thank you so much in advance. See you in the next episode.